Hey everyone, this is your host Sophia Nelson, CEO and founder of Virginia's Redefining Freedom Center. This is the Building Bridges podcast. This is our second episode. If you missed our first episode of 2025, you want to check it out. It's on our YouTube channel. Everything is housed under my brand. I am Sophia Nelson, and we do that so that you don't have to look all over there. Is a lot of social media. There are a lot of platforms, and we know that your time is precious. So we like to get you in and get you out with some takeaways. So this week, as we kick off February and Black History Month, I wanted to spend a little time with you talking about a topic that has been divisive, hurtful, demeaning, and frankly destructive to our national discourse. And that is, of course, DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now, before I get to this week's podcast, let me say a few things. One, we will have a podcast at least once a month, maybe twice a month, 3 times if things get really crazy and we need to come on. But I am super excited about my first 2 guests that I have lined up for the end of this month. So there will be 2 more podcasts in February, and March we will look at Women's History Month and celebrate Women's History Month. And I'm going to have some amazing women who were elected officials in this country and some who are currently serving. And we're going to talk about the issues that help us to build bridges and to unite our communities and to make sure that we are guardians of freedom and that we are protecting our most precious asset, freedom. You know, behind me right there on my wall in my office hangs a copy of the Declaration of Independence. Now, you all know I'm a big Thomas Jefferson fan. And I am. And I know that that's controversial too. A lot of people say, Sophia, how could you possibly like Jefferson? He was a slave owner. He made one of his slaves, Sally Hemings, a concubine, had children by her, didn't free her, and on and on and on. All those things would be true. In fact, the first 11 out of our first 13 presidents, except for John Adams, owned slaves. That's right. 11 out of 13 owned slaves. So if we were in the business of castigating, condemning, scorning our founding fathers, we would have to scorn our first 11 presidents, many of our founding fathers, and those who came after through Jim Crow and otherwise. So we're not in that business. We're in the business of truth-telling. We're in the business of discussion, even when it's difficult. We're in the business of seeing how we form a more perfect union. And that's why I founded the Redefining Freedom Center here in the Commonwealth, the great Commonwealth of Virginia. Talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I want to do it in a context. I like to keep these podcasts short so that you can grasp what we're talking about. You can share it. You can engage with it. Nobody wants me going on and on and on, so we're not going to do that. You know that I've written a large body of work on this topic dating back decades. My latest piece in Forbes magazine, in Forbes, is about DEI and what the President of the United States did after the horrific airplane crash at DC earlier a few weeks ago, right after the inauguration, and how in the midst of such a tragic circumstance, the President of the United States, instead of uniting people and building bridges and comforting the nation, decided to divide the nation and talk about DEI being responsible for a horrific plane crash, which of course it was not. We know that the 3 military pilots were young people. They were amazing young people. They were experienced. They were gifted. They had their whole lives ahead of them. And we know that the 64 people on the American Airlines were citizens, moms, dads, families. We happen to know one of the families here in Virginia, the Ice House, the rink down in Ashburn, members of church, a mother, father, and both their children lost in that horrible plane crash. So it's not appropriate to talk about DEI in those circumstances. It's not only not appropriate, it's actually a really horrific, ugly thing to do when people are already hurting. So I want to talk a little bit about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And you're going to forgive me for sipping some of this coffee here because I'm a coffee addict and I own it. But I think if you follow me, you know that by now. But we keep it real here. We have conversations. It is, when you see this podcast, it will be over the weekend. It's Super Bowl Sunday weekend. So everybody's looking forward to the big game between the Eagles and the Patriots. And I want to start there because the NFL made a controversial announcement over the last 24 hours, and they decided to remove the End Racism logo that they've had on the helmets of players in the end zones on some of the paraphernalia. And they did so. Why do you think? Anybody know why? Guess who's going to the Super Bowl? President of the United States. And they don't want to upset or offend him. Let's start there. Let me say that one of the things I love about the United States of America, and I love many things about her, but one of the things I love most is our freedom of speech, our freedom of thought, our freedom of going where we want to go. You can literally hop in your car right now, pack up a bag, and drive from Virginia to California in about 4 or 5 days, and stop in Wyoming, stop in Colorado, stop in New Mexico, Texas, whatever route you're taking, and you can stay at a hotel, you can go to a park, you can go hiking, you can camp out, you can do whatever you want to do. Theoretically speaking, no one should bother you. That's what Mr. Jefferson envisioned with this declaration that sits behind me. And I keep a copy of the declaration, as I alluded to earlier, because not only is Jefferson one of my favorite founding fathers because he was a great Virginian, but he was brilliant. And everybody should read his notes on Virginia. And really what everybody ought to focus on is religious liberty. And we're going to talk about that in a moment. But I want to get back to the NFL and this notion of freedom. And in that freedom, our founding fathers, James Madison, another Virginian, best friend of Thomas Jefferson, came up with a core set of values, founding principles, if you will, which are the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments. And in that Bill of Rights, if you look at it, the first thing that Mr. Madison does is he enshrines religious liberty, freedom of the press, freedom of speech. And then the Second Amendment, of course, is the right to keep and bear arms, and on and on and on. And so I think it's important when you consider what the NFL's doing, these lawsuits that are being settled by ABC and CBS and other outlets against the president, who has brought suit, frivolous suits, saying either that he was defamed or mistreated in some way or maligned in some way. And media outlets, the free press, are capitulating. They're giving in. They're firing journalists like Jim Acosta, who I hope to have on this show soon, among others. And they are, and let me correct myself, Jim was not fired. I don't know that. What I've read and what I understand is that they tried to give him a time slot that was woefully inadequate for someone who had top rankings and ratings in his 10 a.m. slot every day in the day, who's an award-winning journalist, a New York Times bestseller, and a true newsman. And we all know that they did that because Trump doesn't like Jim Acosta. And don't believe me, go look up Trump's tweet to that effect. Well, today, Donald Trump tweeted about Eugene Robinson, a dear friend of mine who I've known forever. Gene is one of the most decorated in terms of journalists, veteran journalists. He's on the editorial board at the Washington Post. He's a Pulitzer Prize winner. He's fair. He's honest. Amazing father, husband, widower now. And to go after him the way he did and to see the free press back up and not aggressively go after the president in these press conferences and to let him say crazy things, batshit crazy things, like Gaza should become a Riviera and that they're going to move almost 2 million people somewhere else, God knows where, so they can build condos and clean it up. Who does that sound like? What does that sound like? This is not a real estate deal, Mr. President. That is not what this is. Right with the Israeli prime minister standing right next to him, which makes it even worse. So, starting with the NFL capitulating by removing End Racism, which is a thing every single American, including you maggots out there, should support, right? Because you're an American, right? You believe in freedom, don't you? You believe in equality for all, as you talk about. You believe in colorblindness, right? Which you really don't, but you say you do. And why would any of us be against ending racism? Think about that. Why would any of us be against that? It's kind of dumb, right? But that's where we are, folks. And talking briefly about DEI, let me give you my thoughts on it and why it is being used as a horrible weapon, a divisive weapon to break this country. You know, none of us likes to believe, particularly when we're Americans, that somebody's getting something that they don't deserve, because we believe in hard work, we believe in fairness, we believe in merit, we believe in equality, and we believe in freedom, most of all. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, Mr. Jefferson wrote about. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. When those words were written, and I've said this many times before, guess what? Half the population in the South was enslaved. And it took another 200 plus years before they would be freed, and there was another 100 years of Jim Crow. We've seen this type of regressive behavior before. It was CRT, and then it was woke, and now it's DEI. Taking words and academic bodies of research and scholarship by some of the best and brightest people like Derek Bell, now deceased, a Harvard professor, and others who I learned from, and many others studied under at Harvard. And, you know, taking those things and putting them into a 30-second ad and vilifying citizens of this great country and turning other citizens against them. I want to give you some facts, and I want you to fact check me. I've said this before, never believe what I tell you. Fact check me for yourself. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is something that, as leader Hakeem Jeffrey said, really is an American value, right? When we talk about e pluribus unum, out of many one, we're talking about equality. We're talking about diversity. The founders understood that we had to perfect the union. E pluribus unum, out of many one, coined by Charles Thompson in 1780. Charles Thompson, 1780. Was assigned the task of coming up with the national motto, and he couldn't have picked a better one. E pluribus unum, out of many one. What does that mean? There were 13 diverse colonies. Virginia and Rhode Island were not alike. Massachusetts and South Carolina were definitely not alike. Pennsylvania and Georgia were not alike. But they all had to be in this union together, and what they were unified in was their belief that in this nation, we don't have kings, and we don't have tyrants, and we don't have despots. And they created the Constitution. And that Constitution still is our guiding light to this day. And it has been decimated in the last 3 weeks by Trump and Musk. It just has been. Federal workers being terrified. As Mr. Vaught, who just became the new OMB director, said, he wants them to be terrorized. He wants them afraid. Why? Who does that? Who doesn't want children to eat with Head Start? Who doesn't want seniors to have Meals on Wheels? Who doesn't want USAID to go out there and spread the goodness of democracy so that China and Russia don't spread the evil of communism? Building wells, giving people clean water, making sure people eat, making sure people can read in Afghanistan, making sure that women were given literacy and an opportunity to be educated. Instead, the Taliban completely undid all of that. And just a little bit of a taste of where we are, take a look at what has been happening over the last 3 weeks and ask yourself, can we withstand this until 2026 when we have our sequentennial? I don't think we can. I don't think it's sustainable. I don't think it's sustainable for the next few months. But using diversity, equity, and inclusion in every single press conference and everything you say, you blame everything on it, that stuff sticks. It's nefarious, it's racist, it's divisive, it's un-American, and it certainly is not befitting our national motto and our national character. Folks, when you do research and you stop watching Fox News and all these other channels that just abjectly outright lie to you. They lie to you, and they know they're lying to you, but they know you will buy it, and you're gullible because you're sitting around all day and you're watching TV and you got this nostalgia for an America that never existed, by the way. One that you in your mind thinks existed, particularly if you're white. and you think the 1950s were great, the 1950s were not great if you were black in this country. 1950s meant segregated, Jim Crow. You could be beat, lynched, bludgeoned, fired. You had to eat your hamburger in a colored section or drink water from a colored fountain. Rosa Parks didn't give up her seat on that bus in the 1950s. Dr. King started his movement in the 1950s with the Montgomery bus boycott. Into the 1960s. I wasn't born when the Civil Rights Act was signed in 1964, but I was born just a few years later. And so I'm an heir to my parents' generation's work and my grandparents' generation's work. That's affirmative action. That's diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the birthright citizenship, the 14th Amendment that President Trump wants to do away with, that was expressly created, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments for the descendants of slaves. The 14th Amendment was to guarantee equal protection under the law for those who had been enslaved. It was to guarantee that slave persons who were now free, their children would be citizens of the United States, and that would be enshrined and guaranteed. The problem is when you expand rights and you don't explain them, people like Donald Trump and his ilk come along and they lie and they divide and they conquer. Around my neck every day, I wear this dog tag. And it is one of my favorite Latin phrases. And you all know that I had many years of Latin. I drop it sometimes on television. Sometimes it's in my columns. But Veni, Vidi, Vici. I came, I saw, I conquered. I came, I saw, I conquered. That's America. That's our ethos. That's who we are. And nobody has had to do that more than Black people in this country. I have empathy for our brown brothers and sisters, our Latino brothers and sisters, and South Asian brothers and sisters, and our poor rural white brothers and sisters, and women, white women, and all of us have had different experiences in this country that have been challenged. Unless you were rich, white, and a landowner and male, you did not have an easy way to go in this journey, this dream called America. But we've made it work. We've succeeded despite it all. Because at the end of the day, our best moments always occur when we work together and when we help each other and when we include each other at the table of brotherhood and sisterhood, at the table of economic commerce, at the table of liberty, at the table of freedom. That's how this works. And I want you to think long and hard about why somebody would be against a diverse workforce, a diverse college campus, a diverse industry, a diverse foundation, a diverse assembly of worship. I want to get to religious liberty really quickly because the president has created an office of faith, defending Christian faith. I got mixed feelings about that because, like Thomas Jefferson, I believe that there should never be a national religion. One should not be preferred over the other. I am a Christian. I am a dyed-in-the-wool, evangelical, Bible-thumping, Bible-believing Christian, and it has gotten me into trouble a time or two. But I tell you what, I don't believe we should have a federal office defending Christianity. And you're talking to someone right now who many of you know my story of what happened on my college campus in Virginia back in 2021. I asked a civil question about a comic book character that happened to be LGBTQ+. And I simply asked, well, what would Christian parents tell their children? You can Google it. You can read it for yourself. I don't want to get off on a soapbox on it. It's not worth talking about other than to say that nobody should be subject to what I was subject to. Nobody should ever have to be protested, attacked, demeaned, death threats at their home, written and verbal and otherwise, losing career opportunities, losing contracts, losing your professional reputation, because who hires somebody who's anti-LGBTQ plus or anti-DEI? Who hires somebody that is a threat to the safety of others? Nobody does. And I want you to understand that's how we got here. I think we're not having a real honest conversation about why the president of the United States and his ilk are using DEI the way that they are because it's effective and it works for them. It's divisive, but I got to tell you, some of those who were proponents of DEI, you got us into this position because you went too far. And we need to mend it, not end it. We need to have a real courageous conversation about what real civility is, what real freedom is, what real liberty means, and how we have to respect it in others, even when we vehemently disagree with them. As Voltaire said, paraphrasing, I may not agree with what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. DEI in a nutshell, folks, diversity, equity, and inclusion is a set of principles and goals and guidelines to help us to do better with one another, to respect different viewpoints, to work better together, to open ourselves and expose ourselves to people who don't look like us or come from where we come from or think the way we think, so that we can build better companies, build better cars, build better products, be more successful, economically advance, socially advance, and connect with one another. That's what DEI at its core should be. You get no disagreement from me that it went too far. And we need to discuss what keeps it where it should be, with the goals that were set long before you and I were ever born, of e pluribus unum, out of many one. Means many different viewpoints, many different faiths, many different races, creeds, and colors. And when we come to this great place called America, we become Americans. And we stand for those values that Mr. Jefferson outlined in this great document behind me. And those documents include freedom of the press and free speech and the right to assemble and the right to protest. Those are enshrined in our documents for a reason. Because our founders never wanted a king, they never wanted a tyrant, they never wanted a despot, they never wanted authoritarianism, they never wanted an oligarch, they never, ever, ever wanted that, because they knew firsthand what you and I will never know, what it is like to be under the rule and the thumb and the terror of a crazy king named George III of England, truly a mad king, literally had mental health problems and was mad. So probably the government was being run by others, not even him at the time. That's neither here nor there. The point is, he threatened people's lives. He had his soldiers come and beat people, kill people, take from people, levy taxes at his will, do whatever he wanted, just like Elon Musk and Donald Trump think they can do by going into our federal government agencies. These are regular people like you and me. These are our neighbors. Literally, my neighbors work at the FAA, the CIA, the FBI, and the NSA. Literally, that's my little quarter. And all of them are terrified. And these are all public servants who have served now for 30, 40 years. Good people, working hard to protect their country, to defend their government, to make sure people get what they need. And in the national security realm, to protect this homeland from terrorism, from Putin, from China, from the bad boys, Iran, and all the countries that we know mean us harm. Why would we pick on those people? Why would we throw them out of their jobs? Why would we do that? What could be a possible, justifiable reason to do that? There is no reason. I'm going to end with this. I love this country. You love this country. But we got to find a way to love each other, or there will be no country. You hear me? This racism, this craziness, this love of Confederates that got their asses kicked, that were a bunch of cowardly traitors who felt entitled to have slave labor so that they could live in largesse and on their great plantations. Really? That isn't America. It's part of who we are, though. We shouldn't run from it. We shouldn't hide. We should talk about it. We should deal with it. Hiding from history is not the answer. And in this Black History Month, I salute 888, which is an amazing movie watched on Netflix about a colored women's regiment back during World War II and how they got the mail to the soldiers when nobody else could and had given up. Mail during a war is everything. It's how you connect with your family, your spouse, your kids, your loved ones. It's how you get encouragement. It's how you get somebody to send you money or send you a pack of cigarettes or whatever they did at the time. It was a lifeline. And these Black women, against racism and oppression and hostility and abject evil, still did good. And they got the soldiers what they needed. And we remember them this Black History Month. And I'm grateful for the last Tuskegee Airman that just passed away yesterday. And he was 100 years old. God bless the Tuskegee Airmen who, by the way, they tried to cancel the Tuskegee Airmen, but even that was a bridge too far for Secretary Hegseth and others, and they shut it down. But this is what happens when we villainize and terrorize each other on race. And we lie about color blindness when color blindness simply doesn't exist, and it will never exist. Because the moment I walk into the room, or an Asian person walks into the room, or a Hispanic walks into the room, or a woman walks into the room, or a man walks into a room, everybody knows who we are. It's noted. It may not be a problem, but it's noted. That's just human. So let's cut the crap and start being honest with each other and having real conversations that move us forward, that build bridges, that help us do better with one another and understand one another better. What Donald Trump and Elon Musk are doing right now is not the best of America. It's the absolute worst. It's only been 3 weeks. Can you imagine what 6 months in looks like? I can't. I'm concerned. And I use the power of my pen and of my platform to do my best to be a voice to speak out. You'll see a lot more from me soon. I look forward to having my guest on. But diversity, equity, inclusion is not a bad word. It's not something you need to be afraid of. You need to be afraid of bad diversity, equity, and inclusion policies. And I think we had many of those. I lived through it, and I'm a Black woman. And it was because I was a Christian more than anything. So I understand the president's instinct to want to protect Christians, but that's not what we do here. We have the debates in the public square. If we need legislation, if we need to relook at some things, we do that, but we do that on a bipartisan basis, and we talk to each other. Paula White being the head of this office is just a whole hot mess that I do not have time to get into. She's partisan. She's going to be very in favor of white nationalistic views of evangelistic Christian orthodoxy, which does not move us forward. And that's not what we need. We need to honor our First Amendment and protect religious liberty for all. Our Jewish brothers and sisters, our Muslim brothers and sisters, Christians, Catholics, Lutherans, and people, by the way, who don't believe in God or Jesus at all. They are protected too, because that's what we do in this country. That, again, is what makes us amazing. That's what makes us free. I love you guys. God bless you. Have an amazing Super Bowl. Don't eat too many chicken wings. Don't drink and drive. And have a really good time. And you know I'm a Cowboys fan, so I'm not really nuts about either team in this Super Bowl. But I guess if I have to choose one, it's going to be Eagles, since I grew up in South Jersey across the water and have been to a number of games over in Veterans Stadium. If they still play there, I don't know. And so a little bit of home sentiment there. So go Eagles, and we will see you soon with some great guests. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America. Bye now. Bye now. You can see I'm having a little bit of trouble getting out of the studio. I'm going to get better at this, I promise.